Besides reading, writing, and arithmetic, New York high school seniors are getting a fourth R, Regents. The state has begun phasing in a new system that ratchets up the requirements for high school graduation with a stiff new testing regime. But are the students ready? Or are New York City's schools ready? We'll explore these questions with two of the city's borough presidents who have substantial impact on the public school system. But to set the stage, we have a background report from CSS Urban Agenda correspondent Don Alexander.
A new era is arriving for New York City high school students by order of the state's Board of Regents. Gone is the old system with its two types of high school diplomas, one academically more rigorous than the other. Replacing it is a new, tougher system. It will require that in order to graduate from high school at all, students must pass 5 exams, all at college preparatory level. The tests will be in global history and geography, United States history, 1 laboratory science, algebra, and English. The new policy is being phased in. Students who entered high school in the fall of 1996 will have to pass the English exam if they want to graduate this year. Even some of the city's conscientious and motivated students admit they're frightened.
The system is working in some areas, but other areas I don't think they should have a Regents.
They raise the Regents requirements too high, too fast.
I think most students won't get a high school diploma. I think most of them will drop out. If they don't, then that's like a miracle.
If you don't pass like a certain Regents, you can't graduate, and it's frustrating because if you can't graduate, you know where you're going to go.
The first big problem is getting students to the point where they're even eligible to take the exam. Of the 54,227 New York City teens who entered the 9th grade in the fall of '96, fewer than half have become seniors. The rest dropped out or have been left back. Of the remainder who have recently taken the test, State Education Commissioner Richard Mills has boasted that 88% passed. But then again, the bar was lowered. They only needed to score 55% to pass. Starting 4 years from now, high school students will need to achieve at least 65 on all 5 exams in order to graduate. An analysis by CSS reveals that 65% of New York City's more than 1 million students are at risk of not meeting the new English standard. That's double the amount of any other area in the state. And despite ordering New York City high school students to learn a lot more, the state is not providing much in additional resources to help them do it. In fact, as calculated in terms of aid per student at risk of not meeting the English Regent standards, New York City got the lowest increase in fiscal year 1999-2000 as compared to suburbs, other cities, and rural areas. The increase for rural districts, for instance, was about 3 times the size of New York's. Some state legislators don't like to vote more money for the Big Apple because they think it rewards failure. But here and elsewhere, smaller class sizes have been demonstrated to improve academic performance. Yet in his 2000-2001 budget, Governor Pataki proposes to stop in its tracks previously scheduled funding increases to reduce class size in the lower grades. No such programs for high schools are even proposed, and it's no secret that New York City's problems have pronounced racial overtones. The worst performing high schools in the city's system are overwhelmingly populated by children of color. The state's decision to leave them in the backwaters of the funding stream raises troubling questions about whether the powers that be in Albany have a subtext to their policies that maintains or deepens an underclass based on race. Now, no sane person can argue with the concept of raising educational standards in New York. But the way this Regents program is being implemented, it's almost certain to put tens of thousands of poor New York City teenagers on the streets with no high school diplomas at all. And that can only complicate their lives in a world in which educational attainment is vital to survival. This is Don Alexander reporting for the CSS Urban Agenda.
We're joined today with Bronx Borough President Fernando Ferrer and Queens Borough President Claire Shulman, talking about a very difficult issue for all of us. I'll start with Claire. What do you think about the new Regent standards, and how can we make it so the kids can actually pass these tests for your borough, for instance?
Well, first of all, David, I think that standards have to be raised. Mm-hmm. I think that kids are graduating who are not literate, and that really is unfortunate. So I believe the standards should be raised. I do not believe, though, that a city as diverse as ours can go with one diploma. There are so many different variables here that it's very, very difficult to say all the children are going to perform on this level or else they're not going to graduate. I just don't think that's possible. In a borough like mine, where every other kid is coming from someplace else in the world, I could have a child coming from China who's a whiz in math and doesn't speak English. What do I do with that kid? He can't pass the Regents. I mean, we have all sorts of programs to help them navigate through the system, but this business is a lot more complicated than it appears to be in the newspapers. And we have a lot of children with talent who are not going to be able to pass the English Regents. I think that we need a little more study, but I do believe that every child can learn, and I believe that we ought to prepare the children at pre-K to be able to learn and to have a sense of their own ability to learn, and the expectations for those children in the pre-K and K should be very high. And I think we'll probably find eventually that the performance of a lot of these children will improve significantly. But again, I have a borough full of immigrants, and I have a difficult time trying to understand how we're going to deal with that. And a lot of these kids are smart. So, you know, we have to raise standards. I don't think that we can compete globally in the next century or even this century if we don't educate our children. And the city will be different.
Yep. Ready?
I think it's pretty obvious that all of us who are in the position of hiring people who come through not only New York City schools but colleges, public and private, are vexed by the fact that most candidates for jobs cannot compose a paragraph in the English language that is comprehensible. That's a problem, and that's a problem that we've had to deal with for a long time. So, one, I really haven't got a problem. In fact, I support imposition of higher standards. The absence of that presupposes that kids can't learn, or that they're incapable of learning, or lack some basic intelligence. That's wrong. Second, I really do support the imposition of pressure on the system, but the pressure has come about in the wrong place. In fact, kids are feeling the pressure more than our educational system is feeling it. That's the problem. I don't even have a difficulty with one graduation standard for high school. In fact, I think that is the essence of egalitarianism. That does promote the sense that we are all teaching the same thing, but let's examine what the deficiencies are, because the imposition of these standards didn't show deficiencies in kids. It revealed deficiencies in our system. The lack of consistent instruction across the system. The failure to prepare and recruit certified teachers. The failure to deal with an enormous school overcrowding problem across the system. The failure to receive equity with respect to funding for our school system. And most fundamentally, the failure to really understand what the real issues are in our system. This isn't reducible to slogans that fit easily on a bumper sticker like "end social promotion now." Right. That's stupidity, and that's peripheral at best. The real problem here is improving the quality of teaching and learning in the classroom at all grades so the kids are prepared for these higher standards.
Well, you know, I'll tell you something, Freddie. You hear so much rhetoric about, you know, our #1 priority is education, and everybody is talking about it.
Sure.
And then, you know, things like, well, we're going to put all these teachers in the classroom, and we're going to do universal pre-K. I haven't got one classroom for universal pre-K because I'm minus 30,000 seats in Queens.
And we haven't got them either in the districts that need them most.
Something else in Queens that's unique, and that is, while your high schools are operating on a 10-period day, Many of my high schools are operating on an 8-period day because we don't have the seats to do a 10-period day. So how
we
are
have
my
massive
kids going to pass
overcrowding.
the English Regents?
We have massive overcrowding.
So
in our high
you
schools
know,
as well.
I have 30 kids in the class. I can't do pre-K. We have to kind of contract it out.
Well, this isn't a Queens problem or a Bronx problem. This is a New York City problem, and it's a failure of the system to make the interventions at the appropriate time for kids.
Why haven't we been able to move this as a legislative issue? We got, as the report indicated, creamed. That was a per capita number we were talking about. The rural district's getting $1,400. We getting $448 per capita. But we have the highest, you know, intensity problem. What's
But
going on
that's-
here?
Well, there's a court case that deals with what are we getting and what is upstate getting.
I'm a
And, you know,
litigator. This will be long buried. You know, me first.
You don't
before
think
we
that's
see.
going to?
I think it's going to come, but it's going to, as we saw
think we
with
may win
Jim
this
Florio.
case.
Yeah, but I saw what happened to Jim Florio when he tried to implement a court ruling. It took years, and he ultimately lost the gubernatorial role when he tried to shift money.
Yeah,
Well,
but
thank
you see
goodness
what
we already
Bruno
have a
did?
property tax.
Well, did you
and
see
an
what
income
Bruno
tax.
did yesterday? They want to increase the amount of money for to prepare students better, and I forget what the number was, but we were going to get 38% of that money, which is a lot different.
Yes,
than,
of course, the 32 or 34%
Yeah.
we generally get. But it's still interesting. This should be a bridge issue for the state because the state has fallen way behind in terms of educational caliber.
Well, I think it's fair for parents especially to say, as long as they're holding our kids to higher standards, and that's a good thing, we ought to hold teachers, administrators, boards of education, boards of regents, and politicians to higher standards as well of performance. High standards are good for everybody. And we all ought to be held accountable for what we do with the system. My view is that Rudy Giuliani and the education wars for the last nearly 7 years has squandered the most intriguing opportunity to invest political capital in doing something about a problem rather than to beat somebody over the head because they disagree about vouchers, for example.
Claire? So you have to.
Well, I think that the mayor is interested in improving education. I have to tell you, Freddie, he pressed Crew to make those changes. Crew was not really willing to make as many changes as he eventually made.
The crew was his idea, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, no, but the point is that, you know, I think the mayor is sincerely interested in improving the quality. He
I
didn't
have
wanna-
yet to discern that.
Well,
I guess.
there is a difference of opinion here. The mayor has been pressing for certain changes in the public education system. He's been pressing for accountability in the classroom. He's been pressing for accountability all along the line.
Well, let's talk about that a second. Under his watch, he negotiated a teacher's contract that ended the review of lesson plans. That's pressing for accountability. Planning is at the essence of effective teaching.
I don't want to get off because
Look, you know,
yeah.
Freddie, you and I both agree that teacher salaries should be raised significantly
Indeed.
if we are to attract qualified people to teach our children. We can't do it now because the salaries are not competitive, and it costs money to live in the city of New York. So I think that everybody should understand that we really have to increase teacher salaries.
And it's about
And
salaries.
I'm delighted that Donald Singer and the union voted to take away tenure and reintroduce the contract. They still get their due process, but they have to be accountable for their performance.
Let's talk about what
important.
the positive things, and this is one of them that's going on that we want to encourage now. I think I won't even go off on my own attitude on the mayor and education.
I think that's vitally important.
It is, but it's past. I think we're going into a new era, and you know it, obviously, and I think everyone knows it.
I think we're
And the
coming
question-
into one, but
Yeah,
it's
we're
very
coming
much
into
present.
one. I know, but I think now is the time to start building what we would like the system to
Yes.
look like, and I think that has to be the focus here.
Well, David, I want to tell you something. In Queens, I have 2 districts that run along the Nassau County border, and I think this is significant. District 29, District 26. District 29 income equals District 26 income. Private home ownership here, private home ownership here. This district is one of the highest in the city, and this district is one of the lowest in the city. And try and figure out why that happens. That shouldn't happen. The African American income in the borough of Queens exceeds the white income. These two districts are identical. The only difference is this one is white and this one is black. And so I think that really demands some study. And I mean, I can make guesses on what happened here, but that's the real question in the city.
I think there are some unfinished business here. We've done analysis, the one that got me in trouble some years ago, looking at teacher assignment issues. And I think Harold Levy and crew, just before he left, were starting to delve into this.
Yeah.
We do have a bizarre system where basically after 3 years of seniority, a teacher decides where he or she wants to go. And that's fine. As a matter of fact, I've been a union kid for all my life.
Yeah, but they're going out of the city.
They're going out the city, or they're going to other parts of the city where it's easier. The trouble now is the administrative one. There's no effort to backfill with certified teachers in the neighborhoods they're leaving. And when we looked at it, there had been an out-migration of almost 800 of these teachers who had certification, and I know there's some question if they're old, they're not good. When I get my kid taught algebra and pre-calc, I don't care how, attuned they are to the young people. I want someone who actually knows the subject.
Right, right. That's exactly correct. And it's not merely a question of possessing state certification. It's a question of holding the three entities responsible for producing a qualified teacher accountable. People who produce them in the first place, schools of education. They're not doing a good enough job. The people who certify them, the Department of Education, held to account for treating teaching as the profession it is not currently treated as. It's not a profession in the sense that law is a profession, medicine is a profession, pharmacy or engineering or architecture. And finally, the third leg of that, those who hire those teachers, the New York City Board of Education. The three of those entities have an important stake in preparing, recruiting, and producing teachers who are of high enough caliber to teach at these higher standards. None of that has occurred until two people really forced the issue. State Commissioner of Education, Rick Mills, and the interim chancellor, Harold Levy, really did jointly start forcing the issue and start holding schools of education accountable. When my wife started student teaching, she is currently an elementary school principal. A clinical experience for which you got college credit, education credit, was absolutely essential and a prerequisite to being let in the front door as a teacher. That now today is honored more in the breach than anything else. And in fact, we have to go even deeper than that. We have to talk about 5-year programs for education, as well as a longer instructional day for kids and more consistent instruction. What Claire mentioned in two adjoining districts, one black, one white, is a function, I believe, and I've seen those anomalies in my own borough and throughout the city, is a function more of uneven instruction across the system. We're not on the same page. Right. We give a standard test, but kids aren't learning the same things from one fourth grade in one corner of the city to another fourth grade in the other corner of the city. That is wrong.
I think one of the things we're going to be up against, getting back to the Regents standards, most kids that I know in Prospect Heights High School and the rest in Brooklyn are getting math for consumers. The new math Regent has pre-calc on it. You cannot teach this in a summer remedial course. There's a whole series of inputs to take a child along. And there's real question, and this has been seen by the union as somewhat unfair, that their own math teachers in many of these courses could not pass the Regents standard.
Exactly.
So this becomes a race, and obviously a real restructuring. I don't get the sense of urgency here, because I think the kids who were in this report are indicating this could be really devastating. What happens if this economy, as it almost surely will, starts to stutter? You have suddenly, a multiple number of children who come out with no high school diploma whatsoever.
Right.
What's going to be? What do they do then? You know,
You have that now. You have
Right.
a very large percentage of
Who are not.
dropouts in the city system. You know, I believe that we ought to not only focus on the high schools, of course, you're
Right.
being forced to do that, but I think we have to focus on the early grades. I think everything starts in kindergarten, pre-K, first grade. The whole attitude of education that is instilled in children starts there, and we ought to focus on that. And as I told you, we opened a new school on the Queens College campus.
Right.
We started it with pre-K and K. We started in September, and it's focusing on math, science, and technology. And once the staff at Queens College discovers what's the best way to teach that subject to very young children, we will then rotate our teachers from the borough through the program.
True, so they start to
So we're going to
experience
we're going to staff development, and how are we going to teach in an innovative way little kids? And we didn't cream skin for the school. We took them from all over the borough.
Right.
And they're wonderful, and they're really symbolic of the borough because they're all different colors and sizes and shapes. And we're doing really well. But that's only a small, innovative program.
Coming
We
to
have
scale.
to do that everywhere.
Well, what Claire
Yeah.
is alluding to is a very important failure of our system for over a generation.
Right.
And that is the almost allergy it has with respect to replicating best practices. Has an allergy. We have a similar situation. In fact, we've undertaken the staff development by now. KIPP Academy in the Bronx. It's a magnet school, but doesn't interview kids. Takes all comers from the
Right.
district.
Cashman.
It has the second highest scores in the elementary grades in the borough, and the absolute highest middle grade scores in the borough, and in the top 10% of the nation. This is in the South Bronx, heart of the South Bronx. What are they doing differently? Well, what magic, what alchemy is involved here? Well, no, they're all on the same page in terms of instruction.
Right.
They have a longer instructional day.
Day.
I mean, this isn't magic.
I know.
These are things we all know about that we don't have to appoint new task forces to evaluate. We just got to get about and set about replicating these best practices.
You guys are powerful people in your own way. How do we get control of this system to really make this a priority? It hasn't been a real priority.
Well, let me tell you what I'm doing. Because my worst problem is seats. It's very hard to teach a kid.
When he has no room.
Right.
Right.
So I have what I call a war room, and I meet every month with school facilities, with the SCA, and with the district superintendents and the high school honcho. And we go over every project, new projects, projects in construction, and projects that are about to open. And we demand status reports on every one of those projects. The war room usually takes about 2 hours, but we go through the entire list of site selection, whatever is involved in putting a shovel in the ground for schools. And let me tell you, it works. It works. Everybody's afraid to come without a status report.
Yep.
Everybody wants to do a good job, and so they come and say, well, we advanced this project this far. And I mean, I have control over that. I don't have control over pedagogy. I'm not a teacher, and I wouldn't want to control it. But I sure can help control putting the shovel in the ground.
Well, maybe this raises the question, who should control this? Should we have a Board of Ed the way it's constituted? Right?
Well, in fact, we can have an impact on it. We have an impact on construction, obviously, in the borough. But we also have an impact on curriculum and instruction. I appoint a member to the Board of Education. That individual is an educator and obviously has a feel for these issues. But I have a point of view as well. I have been pressing for a movement toward consistent curriculum and instruction across the system. That reverses something that occurred 31 years ago in the city of New York, as you know. School decentralization, which was a nice thing, except that it also decentralized and made more fragmented curriculum and instruction across the system. So you can't possibly give a standardized test across the system if they're not learning the same things.
Right.
Well, I believe the system's too big. I think over 1 million kids, very hard to administer.
Right.
I have 270,000 students in the borough of Queens. I'd be the 5th largest city in the United States. And everybody knows that if you want to deliver efficient service, you have to be as close as possible to the people getting the service. And I have always said it, the system is too big. It should be decentralized by borough.
Freddie, would you
I have supported that when Claire and then Borough President of Manhattan, Ruth Messenger, supported the idea. I believe that is a useful innovation. But let's be very clear about it. I think the problem that occurred was a movement away from consistent instruction and curriculum. That's an important aspect of what we're dealing with today. We're reaping the harvest of a 30-year failure. And people have to own up to at least that and say, look, we've got to begin to talk in a little more elevated way about the real problems of the system and not the peripheral ones like, let me appoint the Commissioner of Education. That's nonsense. In fact, appointing a Commissioner of Education, let's get right down to it and cut to the chase, doesn't educate a kid better. And let's tell the truth about that. What educates a kid better is a commitment to consistent curriculum and instruction, better teaching methods, better recruitment, training, selection, and in-service training of pedagogical staff, higher standards among the administrative staff, and an ability to hold people accountable to higher standards at the system level. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Kid looks at these new requirements and says, you know, I can't pass this. I'm out of here. What? Not my own experience. I, up until a few years ago, was the father of an adolescent. Here's the problem. We can't continue this anymore. We've got to put the pressure on the system where it belongs.
Let me tell you something. I want to raise teacher salaries, but I want a longer school day and I want a longer school year in exchange.
Year after year, we hear how intractable New York City's public education problems are. With the new Regents standards, the problems may well deepen. A new class of dropouts may be created, those who would otherwise have gotten the non-academic diploma, which is being abolished. The perception that nothing much can be done may be a self-fulfilling prophecy. The city and state have never come close to investing the resources and will needed to do the job. The salaries of city public school teachers typically trail their suburban counterparts, let alone the compensation of other lines of work. There's been no policy to assure that poor urban schools get their fair share of the most competent, experienced teachers in the system, or that classes be small enough to assure students the attention they need to make the grade, or that every high school have a well-stocked library, properly equipped laboratories, and all the other advantages of suburban schools. These problems need immediate correction and adequate resources. Our children deserve nothing less. This is David R. Jones for the CSS Urban Agenda.
To comment on the Urban Agenda or for more information on CSS, contact Community Service Society of New York, 105 East 22nd Street, New York, New York, 10010. Area code 212-254-8900.